map of the current. So he drops down here, he's poking around, and there's this slot that's completely covered in ice. And it's this narrow like passageway, and he climbed up it, got to the top. It goes back over here, and there's an enormous amount of air blasting out of the cave right there. And so he got super excited, went back out, got his dad and some other people. And let's see, got it. Come on. The mouse has disappeared, so I'm trying to hit the here, we'll do this and then I'll finish the story. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, he climbs out, he tells his dad about it. They're both super excited. And then they go back and they start to explore. So they drop down right here, the leaky faucet pit. And this is a narrow slot that goes down to the bottom. It bells out, and they call it leaky faucet because it's like raining in there. There's a ton of water. And this is an alpine cave. So it's about 35 degrees temperature wise, 35, 38 degrees. So it's freezing cold and it's super wet. So they go down here and then they start moving along, surveying, and then they realize like this thing is getting huge, and they keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think they get all the way to this pit, and they're like, this is too big for us. And then they called me, they called John Jasper, Peter Hartley, some other people, and we started going in and working on exploring and mapping this out. So I'm going to show you some photos from this cave, but this is the current map of the cave. As you can see, it goes down quite a bit, and then it hits the bottom here and continues along horizontal for who knows how long. At this point, there's a sump at the bottom, a lake, and then it continues over, and then there's another sump that has to be dove. You can't access that unless you're a cave diver. So I'm going to show you another version of the map. So this is the profile view, a side view, and then here's the top view of the map. There's a lot of little passages going off. It's over a mile long. But I'm going to go through some photos and give you kind of a visual tour of the cave, and then I'll share some stories along the way. I put together a little video that I will show you as well. It's about 10 or 12 minutes. That'll give you an idea of how one of the pits called Frayed Knot Pit got its name. So this is the entrance to Main Drain. It's like I said, it's a 270-foot drop. Although for those who are like super interested in surveying, when we surveyed this cave, this was all done with 4 sites only, which for a mile-long cave, probably not a good idea. And then some of the pits that we measured, I remember when we were measuring Frayed Knot Pit, we took a wire and lowered it down. Somebody rappelled down with it so it didn't have the stretch. And then when we were pulling it up to get the measurement, you yell in these pits, and they're enormous. Like the pit's probably 50 feet across one direction, and about 100 feet or so the other direction, and then it just goes straight down 250 feet. So we lowered that wire down there, and we're yelling back and forth, "Are you ready?" And all you hear is and so you don't know if they're like ready or not. I start pulling on it. I'm like, can I start pulling? So I'm not sure if they're saying it's like they're ready or they're not ready. But anyway, we pulled that up and based our measurement on that. So the cave could be deeper, or it could be a little shallower than that. It would be interesting to resurvey some of those pits in the whole cave if somebody wants to resurvey the whole cave. But anyway, this is the entrance straight down, and it requires some fancy rope work now. Back in the day when we first started exploring it, it was all rope pads, and there's a lot of sharp rock in here. So now it's all bolted alpine style, and so you need to learn how to not just rappel and ascend, but cross over bolts and knots and rebelays and all kinds of things. This is usually how people are when they start going into the cave, and then when they usually get to the bottom and think about how far they have to go out, it's a little less enthusiasm. I took a group years ago down to the bottom of the cave, and they got to the bottom and they're like, "Oh, thanks so much. This has been so awesome." I'm like, "Don't say that yet until you get out." And they got to the top of the first pit that they have to climb out. And one of them, I think it was the guy on the left, was just like, I can't make it. I'm done. It's like so overwhelming because you get to the bottom and you're like, you climb the first 150-foot pit and you're tired and you think, I've got like 900 feet left to go to get out, and it can be mentally overwhelming. So this is my brother dropping into the cave. He also helped a little bit in the beginning. Some of the early exploration. Actually, it was probably later exploration. He came down with us to help survey. And this is him just kind of crossing over the first rebelay down into the cave. Once you get down past the first bit, there's like a ledge that's covered in snow and ice, and you walk over, and then there's another rebelay, and then you drop down that, and there's a big giant snow cone. It's like a mountain of snow that you could fit. You could fill this room up and then pile it up, probably another like 40 feet up, and then it just kind of falls into the cave during the year. So this again is my brother working over one of the rebelays once we started bolting that, which is really fun because as you're like crossing over these bolts, like you really have to make sure that you've got 2 or 3 points of attachment, because if not, you can see back behind them. A lot of times you're sitting there hanging on the wall, and it's just blackness beneath you. You can't really see anything down there. So there he's crossing over. I think he's probably coming up there. He's got his ascenders on. This is at the very bottom. One of the what's this guy's name? I can't remember. No, it's not Spencer. Anyway, he's down at the bottom right next to the massive pile of snow, looking up, thinking about how wonderful it's going to be to climb out. After you get past that, you go in and you climb up this narrow slot where all the ice is, and you crawl through kind of a tight hole, and then it goes back, and that's where you really feel the breeze and the wind blowing at you before you get into Leaky Faucet Pit. Once you get into Leaky Faucet and then you drop down to the bottom of Leaky Faucet, it's really pretty in that area. So we called it Caviar Canyon because it's just loaded with cave pearls. So these are little teeny bits of rock that get sort of moved back and forth and coated in calcite. The calcite accumulates, and then you get these, they're essentially pearls. Then they vary from like just really tiny, like maybe a size of a BB or smaller, to there's some that are probably the size of my thumb or a little bit bigger. I'll show you several pictures of these cave pearls. So just a ton of them. And unfortunately, like some of them happen to be where like right along the trail. So some of them have been walked on by exhausted cavers that have been just trying to survive to get out. But these are some of the early pictures of those cave pearls along Caviar Canyon. And Caviar Canyon is a lot like a slot canyon. You go through it just like something down in southern Utah, except it's limestone, it's sharp, and some places you're climbing up and down and all over the place. So you get pretty tired going through that canyon for probably 800 feet or so. There's also some really pretty draperies, like a lot of white flowstone. So we were really careful as we were going through not to damage that, and trying to be really careful where we walked. You can see this. And then some really interesting just drip formations, like calcite drip formations. I don't know what these are called, but it's just really cool. The water will spatter, and then it creates these like weird flowstony type mushroom looking things. So some more of the pretty calcite. And those are some of the bigger cave pearls. I think those are probably about the size of my thumb, maybe a little bit bigger. And they're still there because we try to preserve them and take care of them. After you go through Caviar Canyon, you start getting into this series of drops. And back in the day when we first found it, like this is as you're going down Caviar Canyon, there's a spot where there's like a 30-foot drop. So this is probably a 30-foot drop. It goes down like a narrow slot, and then all of a sudden it opens up, and then you probably have like 25 feet to fall. And we used to climb that without any ropes, which was terrifying because you're about 800 feet down in the cave, and you can't really stem. Like you can this first little bit. The first bit is relatively narrow, but when it bells out, the rock is super crumbly, and it's like overhung, and there's nothing you can bridge on, and there's a waterfall right there. So if you slip and fall, you probably hit the waterfall and then fall off like another 10 feet into a pool of water at the bottom. So it was pretty scary climbing that, but that was just what we did to try to move fast. we took a lot of risks back then. And then after a while, we got down deep. We're like, if something happened to us, it's probably not going to be good, because getting out of the cave would be tricky. Lots, like I said, lots of narrow slot canyons that you have to travel up and down and around, and it's cold and wet. There's my brother climbing down. So this is underneath that where it opens up. There you've got the waterfall coming down, and he's just about ready to climb up that slot there. So there he goes. And then you get to the big pit, Frayed Knot Pit. So this one, like I said, I mean, it's funny because we say big, but now like after you do these kind of caves, it's like, oh, it's just like a little 250-foot pit. It just doesn't seem as big of a deal as it did when we were first exploring. So this is about 250 feet from the bottom to the top. And it's called Frayed Knot. And I'm going to show you now a video that I put together a while back that goes through how it got its name and a little bit more about Tony Grove and the main drain area and what we were working towards. So hopefully this will work for those of you who are on the Zoom end. Okay, and let's see. Play. And hopefully the audio will work here as well. Let's get past that. I'm going to pause for just a second and see if I can connect the speakers here. Give me just a second. Oops. There we go.
Now it's not coming through on Zoom.
Yeah, it was coming through on Zoom and now it's silent. There it is.
This right here is at the very bottom. That long horizontal passage is you're walking through waist deep pools of 35-degree water.
Caving in this area, in Tony's Grove area, is probably my favorite place ever to cave. Anywhere I've probably ever caved in my life. I love it up here. And I think one of the big reasons is the potential.
There should exist some sort of cave up there that would drain the master system. To get into the master system that ultimately led to the spring 4 miles away, that you'd have this great place that would be nationally known.
We have this bedding of quartzite that runs at a fairly steep slope going down towards Logan Canyon. And we've always wondered if we'll ever find a cave that would go down and actually meet that bedding plane of that quartzite. But at some point along the way, they've always ended. And so that's why this cave is so exciting, because for once it didn't end. Years ago, there was a gentleman that decided to do his master's thesis or his doctoral thesis up here, and he began looking at all of these caves in this area and began putting them on a topographical map and trying to locate where they were. And so automatically people became interested.
Just previous to that year, the Draper Grotto had just been formed. And some of those initial members had come up here wanting to go through the thesis and wanted to find all of these caves. We spread out quite a bit and we covered quite a bit of terrain over a few hours when we were coming off the top of one of the ridges. You can see a little level spot.
There were a few rock tennis that are really deep. We had the rope with us, so we decided to just to drop it and see how deep it was.
I remember very vividly is like, as you're rappelling down, I'm looking at the rock, and all of a sudden it's just reflecting really brightly back in your face. And it was a shock because all of a sudden that snow cone was only just 3 or 4 feet from my head. Got to the bottom, and we looked around, couldn't find any horizontal. At that point, it was pretty late. We had to get out.
I was one of the last ones, or I decided to be the last one out. Being that there were 7 of them, and it being over 200 feet, it took a while. So I just decided to climb around towards the back of the known cave at that time. Just the crack going straight up in the ceiling, just really couldn't see the top, so just decided just to start climbing. I don't even know how high, probably 50 feet or so, and then saw just kind of a hole and decided to kind of pop into it. Immediately the cave changed dramatically.
My first understanding of anything was when Ryan came home late at night, and he come in, he says, Dad, he says, we found it, we found the big one. He says, I climbed out there and he dropped this rock down, he says, it went forever. I think it's like 1,000 feet deep. So I said, okay, if you think it's 1,000 feet deep, we'll take a 150-foot rope and we'll try to get to the bottom.
I remember thinking, I just gotta get back as soon as I can. We didn't have another rope with us. And I knew it was deep. I didn't know how deep, because it was just, I couldn't get a straight shot down, and just the rocks kept banging all the way down.
I think it was like 3 or 4 days later, we packed up and headed up there. We went back in and we looked at this crack, and I said, Ryan, you were out of your mind, because you look up this crack and it's maybe 3 feet wide going up this crack, but the walls are covered in ice, and you look and you say, there's no way you can find this, it's crazy. And then if you fall, you shoot down this ice thing and drop off another ledge. So it's like death, you know.
That's
At this point, we go down and we rappel down to the end of the rope, and it's worse than Ryan's climb because it's wet, and we had no idea what was under this thing. And at the end of the rope, we're still above the floor, and Ryan said, I'm going anyway, and he dropped off the end of the rope. And and I came down and did the same thing, and we both figured we were dead, you know. But anyway, if you could reach out and grab the rope, like, it'd be really hard to get your centers on it. And so off we went down this cave, and we get to a point where we start hearing the roar of this water. And we see things start to drop very seriously. And we start down, we go down these serious waterfalls, down, down, down. And we get into this crinking back and forth thing, and it's getting narrow, and we're thinking, oh, that's not good. And then we hear in the distance this roar. Hear this big roar, and it starts getting bigger and bigger as we get closer. And Ryan's this is good. And all of a sudden, you just pop out of the end of this canyon, and all you see is blackness. the floor just ends. And you see this big scoop going down and the water just roars over the edge and shoots down the scoop and then drops off of this jagged edge. We didn't have any rope, we didn't have anything with us, nothing at all. So we thought, this cave's huge, it's big, and we could just, we threw some rocks down and they just go flying down and not hit anything at all. And it boom, hit this humongous echo. And we just thought, we're gonna go to the center of the earth.
We knew that there's no way we're gonna be able to do this by ourselves. Already the amount of cave that we had come through, dropping two really deep pits, and now don't come to the top of the third one, we just knew that this was way too much to take into our own hands.
Kind of a deceiving cave because you look down the entrance and it doesn't look that deep initially. It looks maybe 60, 50 feet. You can see kind of a ledge down there, but once you go past that, the chamber becomes much larger, you know, maybe 60, 80 feet wide. And yeah, it's pretty exciting.
These guys go in ahead of us and we go in and drop off and we start surveying. And of course, surveying this crinking thing, it's every 2 feet you get a shot. We finally got all finished, and so we start looking for a way to rig the rope out of the waterfall. And right out a ways, there's this rhinoceros horn that sticks out. We thought, oh, perfect, we'll throw the rope over that rhinoceros horn and rappel down. Well, that isn't as easy as it sounds. Number one, the rhinoceros horn was a razor blade edge, and number two, there's nothing to hold on to. And so you're kind of balancing, and you gotta get on rope and then work your way over the rhinoceros horn, which has nothing on the other side, and then get down and put the rope on the rope pad. We actually put 2 rope pads on this thing because it was sharp. We thought, oh, this is nasty. So put 2 rope pads on it. I think we even grounded a little bit with the rock and put 2 rope pads on it and put the rope over it. Anyway, so then all of us worm our way out to this thing, balance, teeter, finally get on the rope and get down.
If there was an accident at this point in the cave, it would be quite a project to get them out. It would be bad.
We get rappelled down and every one of us is saying, we don't ever want to do that again. We're gonna have to change that. We gotta do something different. But anyway, we finally get down to the bottom and we start our exploration.
We had finished surveying quite a long section of cave. You're tired, you're cold, you're wet. And so you're just focused on getting on the rope and ascending out.
I was pretty much geared up and ready to go, and Dan was ready as well. And so I just had to let Dan go. So Dave and I are just sitting there, kind of a good spot we could, stay out of any kind of rock fall. And I remember Dave and I had mentioned, now this is really taking a long time. Dan doesn't take this long to climb a drop.
Anything beyond about 200 feet, there's quite a bit of rope stretch. You're bouncing and swinging, spinning, a little bit disorienting sometimes, dark, wet, there's water falling on you.
This is one of those drops that you get so far up the rope, you look down, it's dark, you look up, it's dark, the rope's just hanging out of thin air. So it gives you this impression of what am I doing here? Why am I on this rope and this endless climb?
As I began to approach that edge, I knew I was getting close to the top, and as I looked up, I could see the rope didn't look the way it should. The sheath was completely gone, and the core had probably half of the cord cut. And the rope changes a little bit of shape at that point. It begins to spread out, almost like, you know, violin string spread across the edge of this rock. So I could see that the rope had slipped away. And the rope had been cut pretty much almost all the way through. My heart pretty much stopped. I was about 10 feet away when I saw this. And I kind of held still for a minute and I thought, okay, this is bad. And so I began to move really slowly, tried to cause as little movement as possible because I didn't want the rope cut anymore. And I got a little bit closer, and I slid my upper center over the sheath and the cord and then what was left of the rope. I pressed it back in. Slid over the top, and then I knew I was safe. I had 1 anchor above the cut part of the rope. And so I climbed above the cut part of the rope, and I tied a butterfly knot to tie out that section that was cut for the other cavers to be able to continue up, and put the rope head back in place, and I think I'd calm down a little bit at that point.
Knowing that I had let Dan go ahead of me, really hit home too, because I'm a bigger guy and I bounced the rope more. And the thought that what might have happened had I gone up first and bounced that rope a little bit more than Dan would have, you know, was another experience that I'll never forget being in that cave.
But the water definitely makes it through, and there's definitely limestone compared to the spring, so, the question of whether there's an actual physically passable, cave that we can make it from here to there, so, we all hope there is, and, you know, the deeper you get, the more water you have, the more the water comes together, the bigger the passage it should be, so the deeper we go, it should get better.
All right, we'll stop there. So anyway, that gives you an idea of what it was kind of like. A lot of those, all that video was shot in Main Drain Cave. So that gives you a sense of kind of what it's like in there and how that pit got its name. That was a terrifying day when Dan climbed up that and saw that foray. So we'll continue on then after, after Frayed Knot Pit, you continue down and there's another 50-foot pit and then it goes into a big room. And then after that room is this pit called Kilo Pit. So this is a picture of the Kilo Pit, which I think is like 150 feet or something like that. And that pit, we call it Kilo because that's where we passed the 1,000-foot mark in the cave. That was a really fun one. I was the very first one to go down that. And we had probably a 50-foot rope or so, maybe a little bit more, maybe it was 100 foot. And then you've got all the rigging. And I rappelled down and it's just this massive pit, really wide open. And back then we had halogen lights and, or if we were lucky, we had like the Petzl LEDs. I can't remember what those are called, the Petzl Duo. They don't shine that far. So when you're rappelling down, like you go down and I'm rappelling and looking down, and then you see the rope down below you, just sort of swaying. And you get down and there's the knot at the end of the rope and you get down to the knot and it's like, there's just blackness. You're hanging there looking straight down and it's totally dark. And I'm like straining my eyes and putting my headlamp on the brightest setting. I still can't see the bottom. So that's a little intimidating when you're there and it's like, there's nothing. I'm at the end of the rope and there's nothing beneath me. It's just like super, super intimidating. So anyway, we went back up, we found some additional ropes, went down to the bottom. And at the bottom of this is where it gets horizontal. And so you go through this canyon, the canyon narrows down and there was this passage, but it was like that tall, about that wide, and half of it is filled with water. And so I think John was probably the first one that went through. He goes through there and you're just like swimming in a bathtub of water for probably like, I don't know, maybe 50 feet or so. And then it opens into a big giant going borehole passage. But that water is so freaking cold. Like you get in there and so you've got the first person going and then the second person's behind you and you got somebody behind you and it feels like you're being stung by 1,000 bees because we weren't using wetsuits. We had a lot of it. Some people had like cotton coveralls or like I don't know what that material is, it's not like the PVC, but something in between PVC and what is it? It's like, yeah, something like that. And the water just like flows up into you and you're just drenched and freezing and your legs go complete. After a while, like the pain is so much that it just like your body like sends into like makes you numb, and then you just don't feel it, and then you just keep going, just keep moving. So we would go down to the bottom of this. So that's looking up Kilo, the last little bit. And the other thing too is, so the rope continues on up here, and this is like a collapse that's wedged in the ceiling. So when you're rappelling down, like the first time you ever go into a virgin cave, a lot of these rocks, you can be on rocks like the size of a bus that will wobble a little bit as you shift your weight because they're just really precariously balanced. And this one's got like a chalk stone. I think some chalk stone's about that big up there. And the thing like rotates and it's wedged against this massive bus size like boulder. So we worked on it. We hit it and tried breaking it away just so we didn't have to worry about it coming down, but it's still there and it still moves. It's a little spooky. Like you just imagine if that thing goes, the entire ceiling collapses. So that's looking up Kilo Pit. And then this is when you get into the borehole that just goes and goes. So you can see there's pools of water. A lot of times you're wading through these. So when we were first going in there, the water is totally clear because it just sits there. But as soon as somebody walks in, it's completely murked up. And there are only certain places where you can walk where it's like only waist deep. If you step over here, all of a sudden it's up to your chest. Or if you don't see something, you trip under the water because there's a rock sticking up and then you fall and then you're swimming in this water. So wearing, like, again, like no dry suits, no wet suits, just like toughness and sucking it up. The main thing is like you just never stop moving. As soon as you stop moving, within a few minutes, you're like hypothermic and shivering. So we just made sure you're always moving. And in fact, a lot of time in caving, like you always stick with a group. In this cave, we didn't. So you go down, you survey, and then as soon as you're done surveying, one person heads out, and then you keep surveying. And then as soon as they yell off rope, the next person gets on, and then you don't see another person until you get back out because you got to keep moving. You can't like have somebody waiting at the top or the bottom of each pit. Otherwise, like you really get hypothermic. So, and the cool thing too, like, so we would, back in the day when we were doing this a lot, we would get down to the bottom. So from the top to the bottom in 1 hour and 15 minutes, we would survey for probably 3 to 4 hours. And then we would climb out in about 1 hour and 30 minutes. So that was hauling. That was when it was myself and John and Peter, like we could fly. Dave Schertz did okay. Ryan did okay too. But those were really nice because we would go in and survey and get a ton of survey done. And then we would just blast out before it got dark, which was nice because it really stinks getting out of a freezing cold, wet cave. And it's nighttime when you get out and it's cold. Like that's just not pleasant. It's nice to get out and it's sunny and then you just like flop on the rock and then sit there in the summer. So here's some more pictures of that borehole underground. This is all these are like self-portraits or like there's one other person. I couldn't find anybody to go with me. And so I got Jason Belinsky from California. He came out and he and I went in and did all these pictures, which was, we had to do some fancy lighting and finagling and photoshopping in order to make do with 2 people and like 3 lights. So this is again more of the borehole. It's all wet down there. And this thing during the spring runoff, I think probably most years it floods. I mean, we don't usually go there in the spring runoff, but not necessarily floods all the way, but the water's probably like 6 feet deeper. So a lot of water down there. Just continuing along the borehole. And this was super exciting. I mean, being the first person to like pop through that little crawl into like going borehole that just went and went and went. That was so cool. And one of the things we were hoping, like the main goal with a lot of the Tony Grove areas, it's in this giant syncline, which is like a fold in the rock where you got like this. So you got a layer of quartzite that's folded up, which creates like a trough. And on top of that is sitting the dolomite, which is soluble. So the water would theoretically work its way down, hit the quartzite, not being able to continue through the quartzite, it then just funnels into a main drain that takes you like all the way down to Wood Camp Spring where it goes out, which means there's like 3,000 feet of potential. So we hit the horizontal part and we're like, oh, we hit the quartzite. This could go big for a long ways. So this is more continuing along that passage. There's also some really cool, interesting things like these really wild looking drip cups that are made out of mud. You can see ripples from the water there. And there's tiny little cave pearls in each of those muddy drip cups. So there's another example of pearls down towards the bottom. And then you get these massive travertine dams that Jason's standing by one. They've all they're old ones. So at one time they were pristine and really cool. Now they've been eroded away by the amount of water going through there. And they're really deep, but they're cracked and they don't really hold water anymore. But there's quite a bit of it in that last little final passage. And then you have one last pit that drops down into a room where there's more like really wild looking mushroomy kind of formations and a big giant sump. So this is the terminal sump of the cave. And this is where we've got divers to go in there and continue the exploration. But the problem is, like, you think about this cave, this is a massive cave system, and it's challenging for like even the most fit cavers to go in there. So trying to get diving gear and cave divers who are in good enough shape to come down and do this dive and get their dry suits and their gear in there without damaging it is really, really challenging. So this is a really hard dive. But they have gone back in there and they've dove the first sump into an more air cave passage. And then they hit a second sump, and that's where it's ended. So I'll show you one other video here. This is just let's see, how are we done on time? What time is it? Okay, so we will show this and a couple more things and then we'll be done. So this is a dive video in the sump that one of the divers took. I can't remember who did this one, but it gives you a sense of what's there underwater. You can see the dive line. It gets silted out a lot because of the water flow. So there's only certain times a year under certain conditions when you can do that. We had one group, it was the what was it? I can't remember their names. Is it Thorson or anyway, there were two divers, brothers, that went down in. We hauled all their gear down there. They went in to do the dive. It was a little murky, and they thought maybe if I continue, it'll clear up. And unfortunately, they went back in, and it was too murky. They had to call the dive after all that work of hauling the gear in. So if you want to do some like really, really serious caving, get into cave diving in freezing water in really deep alpine caves. Climbing Everest is nothing. So another story around this, I wish Jean was here because she's one of the divers and she had an epic story. So she had gone in to dive the sump, and she and her partner like dove, popped out into the air passage. I think they might have been the ones who surveyed the air passage, but then they were going, after they'd finished the survey and looked at the sump, they were going to go back through to come into the terminal sump room, and Jean's zipper got jammed. And so her partner's like trying to work on it to get it to break free. And they're like struggling, and it would not go at all. And they're yanking and yanking and yanking. And finally they give it a really hard pull, and it breaks free and rips the dry suit. And so they sat there for a long time trying to figure out how they could do this, because as soon as she gets into that water and it's submerged, like diving is not fast. Like they don't just like bolt over. They got to decompress and all that. So they finally figured that, okay, well, we'll both go in. I'm probably going to pass out from hypothermia and from the cold and the shock and everything. And then you try to hold the regulator in my mouth and drag me out the rest of the way. And then we'll see if we can resuscitate me once we get out. And luckily, I think she stayed conscious and borderline passed out, or maybe she was pretty bad when she got out the other side, but they managed to heat her back up, and everything was fine. She got herself out of the cave. But she's like, that was absolutely terrifying because it didn't look like she was gonna live. So a lot of risks associated with caving and cave diving.
So there are plans to continue?
I think so. Matt, do you know, isn't there a group that's thinking about making another push?
September of next year.
Okay,
If people wanna help, I mean, you gotta be vetted first, but then that's how it's.
yep. So September of next year gives you plenty of time for those of you who are new and are interested in this kind of thing to like get up to snuff in your vertical skills, and it'd be a great project to help out on. The more people you have helping, the easier it goes. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead here to the end. So there's the diver coming out of the terminal sump. You can see the water level there. I think they popped their head out to take a quick look at where they're at. So there's caver waiting on the other side. And then that's the end of it. So I think that, yep, that's it for main drain. And we don't have enough time to go over Mexico exploration, but I'll give you a little preview here. This is the cave that we did in Mexico. Again, this was virgin until we dropped into it. And this was the cave that had so little air, so much CO2 that a lighter wouldn't start. So we got some pretty epic stories around that. Total depth is about 555 feet deep in a single pit. It's a good pit to try to climb out of a 550-foot pit where there's no air and it's like 85 degrees inside the cave. It's not pleasant, but exciting at the same time. Okay, so I think that's it on the main drain. Does anybody have any questions about main drain exploration stories? Okay, it's cool stuff. Definitely a fun hobby, and if you want to be healthy and stay in good shape, it's a great way to do it.
I just want to say, Brandon, thank you for adapting this to Zoom, because when I was on this in person and you did something like this a year ago or so, I really was sad that I wasn't there to see all the pictures, and this is amazing how you adapted it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
Really chewing our fingernails over here. It's awesome.
Oh, good. That's what we're going for. Chewed fingernails and lots of sweat. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks everybody.
Okay, I have a question.
Go for it.
Okay. So the question is, for people with like maybe, like not speed, but otherwise good vertical skills, what do you think is a reasonable like objective for people who just want to learn the top of the cave, like how far down to go? Like for a first trip to go like a little bit down, and like
Yeah, if you've got decent vertical skills, if you can navigate rebelays relatively easily, I would say go down to Caviar Canyon. Do that, maybe go to the top of Frayed Knot Pit and then climb out and just see how you're doing at that point. I think that would be, it's around 500 or 600 feet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's probably a good starting point. And then you can see how you're doing. And then if you do that and climb back out and you're like, I'm feeling pretty darn good, then it may not hurt to go a little bit deeper. So
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you're brand new to vertical, then but you do have some basic, like, know how to cross knots and bolts and rebelays and all that kind of stuff, then just doing the entrance pit is worth it. It's a really cool entrance pit. So yeah.
Is the cave rigged permanently, or do you have to keep on rope?
I don't know. I think there's rope in there, but I don't know, like, I don't know, maybe Matt, you know better than I do. Like,
Afraid not. Ryan's climb. Faucet is Leaky Faucet. I think Afraid Not is still rigged. Yes, and then
Afraid Not still rigged?
Is that?
Afraid Not's rigged still?
Yeah, I left it rigged last year and then I ruptured my bicep and didn't.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think he's still rigged. Unless someone else can. I think Peter pulled the rope. Oh, did he? but not like, not out of the cave, but
Hmm.
they just cloned it, I think so. Yeah. I know Kilo's got a bad look on it still, I think Kilo could be replaced, yeah. But there's a grant that they're putting in to replace for go for the entire depth of the cave for that dive,
Mm,
so.
that'd be awesome. Cool. Do you want to plug yours back in or?
That's fine, yeah, I'll probably just, I'm gonna be plugged in.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna unplug this.
All right.
Uh-oh, Ammon, are you still there? He signed off.
Ammon had to go.
He had to go. There is a yellow helmet at the Liberty Mountain. May I make a little announcement? The Liberty Mountain sale is extended this week. And it's they've got some kind of softer static rope, but the rope ends are 60% off. And then they had a yellow banana helmet, and I meant to contact Ammon and tell him it's a really light, ultralight Gravel banana yellow. So Banana Gang, Liberty Mountain is having a really good sale. Like some stuff is 60% off. It's still extended. It's still now this week too. So
Anyways, yeah, thank you, Brandon, for that great presentation. That was amazing. Before we wrap up tonight, any questions or comments?
I just want to say, Brandon, if you want to come back and do another like just Tim Grotto meeting where you talk about either Mexico or Nutty Putty, I think we would all be very, very excited for that.
yes. Yes.
I agree. Yeah, I agree completely. So, also just before we go tonight, if you are curious about joining the grotto, you can talk to me after. And if you join tonight or renew your membership, you get a free shirt. So some incentive there if you're interested. Also, yeah, keep in mind it's our next meeting, December 19th. That's our grotto Christmas party. And I'll send out an email tonight with those upcoming trips that are going on, and if you want to join. And then also, if you are interested in that main drain dive, just you can reach out to me and I can get you on the email list. We'll see. You got to make, I think there will be some vetting and make sure like you're ready for the cave. Just because it's a serious cave and I want to make sure everyone's prepared for it. So yeah, but anyway, thank you for coming out tonight, everyone. And we'll see you next month or underground.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. Bye.
Haven't seen you for a long time.